Hey there, Review family! Welcome to a fucking undertaking. I found a massive metal genre tier list with so many subgenres and genres to go over, and I thought it would be fun to just go down this list, give my very concise thoughts, because there's a lot of genres to go through. Obviously, I'm not going to be the most knowledgeable about some of them, so don't crucify me, don't get on my case. I have a drink beside me, so I don't die, and so my throat doesn't decide to give out on me, because we don't want that. But anyway, we're gonna get into this video. I will say this, if there are any opinions in this video that you guys disagree with, definitely let me know down in the comment section below. I would love to hear it. I'm not gonna agree with some of your favorite genres. You're not gonna agree with some of mine. Got it? Got it. So, we have D, C, B, A, S tier. My definition for how this would be is S tier are just literally amazing, they're pretty much as close to flawless as you can be, don't have anything bad to say about them. A is, it's an amazing genre, but it maybe has something that's setting it back from being considered perfect, or like, you could say something bad about it. B is just middle of the road, there's nothing necessarily incredible about it, but there's nothing insanely bad about it. Maybe it's also a bit of a mixed bag. It's a genre that can be very like wishy-washy with the quality of the genre itself. C is something that is below average but still has some redeeming quality, still has some good bands. And then D is just going to be reserved for things that I just don't particularly consider myself much of a fan on. Got it? Got it. Okay, so let's get into it. Lot to get through. So, starting off with hardcore. I think hardcore, if we're talking like hardcore punk, hardcore for me has something that no other genre, and this is coming from a core kid, like a metalcore kid. I really think that hardcore has the best live shows. If you look at an authentic hardcore punk show, you cannot hold a candle to just how amazing hardcore shows are. By the same token, I will say, hardcore has lacked in recent memory. If we're looking at the classics, if we're looking at bands like, Black Flag and Misfits, you're gonna see some really amazing material. But as you get more into the modern era, I think that it's been a little meh along the way. And I think for that, I'm gonna have to put it at like a high B, low A. I will decide based on what we see, but I think that's where I'm gonna put it for right now. So, atmospheric, ambient, / black metal. So I'm not sure why these are linked. I'm wanting to see if black metal by itself is here. I don't think it is, so they're lumping the two. Those are very different genres. Black metal, I will say, how do you not put it at just an S tier? Black metal is such a good template to work with, and there are so many different types of black metal infused music. Black and death metal, black gaze, and metalcore, and folk music, and there's just so much about it. The history of it, the original bands, the first and second wave bands, it's just fantastic. Atmospheric ambient, I would probably put as like a B or C, even though I really do enjoy ambient music. I do think that's where I'd put it. So, next up, grindcore. Grindcore is one of my favorite genres. I really do love it. There are a ton of bands that I enjoy a lot. Benighted, Cattle Decapitation, Napalm Death, Pig Destroyer, fantastic bands. Wormrot. With that being said, I don't think I can put it at an S because, hear me out. Grindcore has a big issue with memorability, and the best of the best bands are amazing, but anything short of that and anything that is, I guess, I don't know what I'd say, just anything that is not sort of the cream of the crop can really blend in with each other. And there are so many just grindcore albums and bands that just are meh. And so for that, I'm going to put it at an A, because the best are amazing, but the thing that's holding it back from being like a perfect genre is just how many bands are just blah. Power metal, this is probably going to get me fucking hated massively. I'm going to put it at a D. It's just not my cup of tea. Like, I get it. I said it in my list. Power metal fans, you're chill. You're some of the coolest people. I just don't personally enjoy it. I appreciate the technicality. I appreciate how the production is, but it's just so played out and sanitized and cleanly produced and just lifeless at points, and just I think also the lyricism can make it hard to connect with the music as much as a genre that has more personal lyrics, or lyrics that sort of hit you more. So that's why I'm going to put it at a D. I apologize. New wave of British heavy metal. That's going at a fucking S. And anyone that says otherwise is just ludicrous, because look at what you're talking about. Iron Maiden and Judas Priest alone make that an S tier. The new wave of British heavy metal was a fantastic movement. It was amazing. It was so good, dude. Like, some of the bands that I grew up just taking so much influence from and inspiration from come from that scene. I adore that scene with all of my heart, and there's a reason that so many of them are still kicking and selling so many records and are so influential to people. And so many of these genres that you see on this list would not be here if it wasn't for bands like Judas Priest and Iron Maiden. So next up, metalcore. Top of S tier for me, and y'all are probably gonna like, the core haters are not gonna like that. I love metalcore. Progressive metalcore is my favorite genre. I don't know if it's here. I'm not gonna check. Metalcore is such, kind of like black metal. How do you really say you don't like metalcore? Because you have tough, hard, edgy, like, beat down hardcore people, like, you know, the Knocked Looses and the Loathes and those types of bands, and Code Orange. But then you also have, like, the sad boy scene core type of stuff, like Asking Alexandria and Sleeping with Sirens and Pierce the Veil and Bring Me the Horizon. And then you have the ones that sort of mix it into a really beautiful melodic way, like Killswitch Engage and As I Lay Dying. And then you have, like, really old bands that were killing it, like Unearth, and if you want to go back even further, bands like Ringworm. Metalcore is so broad. And then you dip into genres like gent, progressive metalcore, and melodic metalcore, and there are so many different ways that you can approach writing metalcore, to where you can have something that can be just literally just like dun dun dun, just so low, so heavy, so distorted. But then you can also have like beautiful melodic choruses where it's like, my girlfriend just broke up with me. It's like so broad of a genre, and those are both metalcore. And it's like, for me, I never get upset with checking out a new metalcore release, because there's always something new in the genre. Sludge metal. Unfortunately, I'm gonna put sludge metal at a B, because it's kind of similar to grindcore, but even worse, where a lot of the sludge metal bands I hear and stoner metal bands I hear are just so meh, and clearly taking so much influence from other projects, namely bands like Black Sabbath and St. Vitus, that it just feels derivative and not in an appealing way. Sludge metal is fantastic, and the riffs can be great, but I just think that it is a slog sometimes, and it's not because it's slow, because I love funeral doom metal. I don't know if it's on this list, but I love funeral doom metal. I love atmosphere, but sludge metal just, I think, gets caught up in its roots a little bit too much. Heavy metal, how do you not put this at just literally, it has to be the top of S, like above anything, because that is the genre. That is the fucking genre. If it wasn't for heavy metal and proto-heavy metal bands, you would not have black thrash and gothic doom and technical death metal. It wouldn't exist. They wouldn't be invented, because the groundwork wouldn't be there. And the original heavy metal bands are fantastic. You can't really say much about it. Tech death. Okay. I love efficiency, I love guitar playing, but I think technical death metal sort of gets caught up a little bit in style over substance, in a similar way that a lot of progressive metal bands do, and for that I'm going to put it at a B. I think tech death is fine, it's a great genre, I do appreciate it, but with that being said, I do think it gets caught up in making something so technical that they forget to make it memorable. Don't come at me. Brutal death metal. I'm gonna put brutal death metal at a C, because it's rough for me, because I love bands like Skinless and Cattle Decapitation and Dying Fetus and these sort of bands, but brutal death metal has gotten so stale over time, the same with like modern death metal in my opinion, where so many bands are just treading water and trying to be, as I literally just made a video about that, heavy as possible, brutal as possible, and missing out on the point of making something substantive and making it sound good solo just as a project. and I find myself not getting too much into a lot of mainstream quote-unquote brutal death metal releases. So, groove metal. So, we're talking about bands like Pantera, bands like Sepultura, bands like Lamb of God. It's a solid A. I love Pantera, I love Lamb of God, I love Sepultura. Like, they're just fantastic bands. I don't think you can really say much bad about them. The only thing holding it back from S is I think that the genre, similar to hardcore, has sort of diminished over time to where you hear less groove metal bands. The only reason hardcore is below it right now is because I think hardcore is suffering worse, whereas you can still see a lot of these groove metal bands still making fantastic releases. Like Quadra was an amazing record from Sepultura. Excuse me, there's a moth. Like, Sepultura keeps making great records, Lamb of God keeps making great records, and even though they do change their style a little bit over time, I do think they're holding on to it better. So, doom metal. Original doom metal is great. I think that doom metal nowadays is probably going to be right beside sludge metal for me, where it's great in the moment, but a lot of bands just get caught up in making something so derivative that it just blends in with a lot of other things, and a lot of modern doom metal I just find myself getting bored with. Don't come at me. Folk metal, I fucking love folk metal, but I can't put it... Here's the thing about folk metal, is I like folk-infused music in other genres. Black and folk metal is one of my favorite genres, and folk metal as a whole, I think, is just kind of meh. I think it's around brutal death metal, where a lot of the bands kind of just get wrapped up in making the same material, and a lot of it blends together, similar in a way to power metal, and I much prefer folk metal being put into other genres, folk influences being put into other genres, than I do folk metal just by itself. Modern death metal, I fucking feel so bad saying this, but it has to be like a C. The OSDM revival scene is so fucking boring to me now. I do enjoy a lot of modern death metal bands, but I just cannot get behind how stale they've become. I made a video called, like, Has Death Metal Become Stale? And a lot of people agreed with how it just seemed like they are just treading water at this point. And there are so few amazing releases, both in the mainstream and the underground, that it's telling when a band like Cannibal Corpse is having to literally carry the modern death metal scene on their back. And so many of the bands that get praised nowadays, like Blood Incantation and Undeath, I am just not seeing the amazingness that everyone else is seeing. And that's the only reason that I have to rank it so low is, I love death metal, like, it is one of my favorite genres, especially the classics, but modern death metal is just lacking in my opinion. Death Doom, I have to rank it at a D, because I think I've just not had many great experiences with Death Doom bands. I think they struggle with picking what they want to dominate their track listing with, and it's either one or the other. It's never just a good mixture or balance, and I think a lot of them are boring. Symphonic metal, I'm going to put symphonic metal at a high B, because I do think it's a very pretty genre, and I do enjoy bands like Nightwish and a lot of the more quote-unquote basic things. Also, apologies if you hear my dog barking in the background. Symphonic metal is one of those things that I can tolerate in low dosages. I can't just listen to it on repeat or all the time and get a ton out of it. But by itself, I think it's a fine genre. It's just, I have to have it in small dosages. Gothic metal, old Gothic metal is fantastic. New Gothic metal is fucking boring as shit. And you can't tell me bands like Paradise Lost aren't fucking boring. I'm ranking that at a D. Speed metal. Classic speed metal is really good, like bands like Motorhead, and I think I have to give it like a very high B, because you don't really see a lot of really good speed metal nowadays, because a lot of speed metal kind of got, like, I don't know what word I want to use, like abducted and assimilated with thrash metal to where it just blurs the line a lot, and I think that's why I have to put it there, but the classic is great. Old school death metal, I'm going to put at a S right below metalcore. And I'm going to put new wave of British heavy metal above black metal. Old school death metal, you can't hold a candle to it. You know, just look at the 80s, look at the 90s, look at Autopsy, look at Obituary, look at Death, look at Morbid Angel, look at Cannibal Corpse, look at the Gates when like the melodic death metal scene came around. And the classic death metal scene is one of the best periods of time for any metal genre at all, in my opinion. Melodic death metal, I do really like melodic death metal, like At the Gates, Dark Tranquillity, Amon Amarth. I do like melodic death metal. For me, I think it does run the risk of getting boring, though, a lot of times, especially in the modern sphere. I think there hasn't been many risks taken with the genre to really advance it. For that, I'm going to put it above hardcore, right beside speed metal, but I don't think it goes above speed metal for me. I think I do rank speed metal above melodic death metal, because as much as I love a band like Amon Amarth, I can admit the fact that they're not doing anything too interesting. Alternative metal, y'all are gonna like probably be pissed off about this, but I'm putting that at like a high A, borderline low S. Alternative metal is what I grew up with. I have a ton of memories with it, with bands like Breaking Benjamin and Linkin Park and those types of bands. I really love alternative metal. I think it's a great way of being a gateway for people into more extreme forms of heavy metal. I think it has a lot of great bands to it. Progressive metal, I think is sort of like a hit or miss. It's either really amazing and some of the best music you'll ever hear in your life, or it is literally the most boring thing ever. I think that's why I have to put it like above speed metal in a B, but not quite an A, because like I said, it's so conditional. You either get a band like Tool or like Caligula's Horse or just an amazing progressive metal band, or you get something insanely boring. For every Dream Theater, there are a million like Dream Theater copycats that just sound terrible. Thrash metal, I am going to put at I'll put it at an A above groove metal, but below grindcore. I think thrash metal is a very good genre. It's a very consistent genre. And if you step into a thrash metal record more than a lot of other genres on this list, you know what you're going to get. You know what you're going to hear. You know how it's going to feel. And it's not going to really throw any punches that you aren't necessarily expecting, unless you listen to a band like, say, Vector. You're not really going to hear much that you don't expect. And there's something to be said about that. I do think there are still a lot of great thrash metal releases coming out nowadays, enough to warrant it being there. So DSBM, it's just not my cup of tea. I do like the sound of it, but I just have to rank it at D. It's just not my cup of tea. Crossover thrash, kind of the same thing. It's nothing against it. Like, Suicidal Tendencies are a great band, but crossover thrash, I just think I would rather listen to normal thrash, because punk and thrash being infused with each other, it just hasn't been my cup of tea. Post-hardcore, I fucking love post-hardcore. That's a solid A. I think it's above grindcore for me. Post-hardcore, kind of like alternative metal, is what I grew up with, and I think there are so many ways you can perform that genre that a band like Holding Absence or Dayseeker is in the same genre as a band like Dance Gavin Dance or a band like, Pierce the Veil. It's kind of insane what you can do with it. Progressive deathcore, I'm just gonna rank this at a D. But the reason why is because I don't know what constitutes this. Actually, no, I do. Is it talking about, like, the Discovery era Born of Osiris, or, like, The Faceless, or, like, Fallujah? Because if that's what we're talking about, that's some good shit. I'll just put it at, like, a solid B above speed metal, because those are some good records, but I don't hear enough of that to really constitute it being higher. Gent, I think Gent is very conditional, where you get a lot of great bands like Era and Born of Osiris, Vilcharta, Veil of Maya, but you also get some really crappy bands. And I think Gent is a very, like, high A, like, I think below post-hardcore, but above grindcore is where I'd rank it. Grunge is fantastic. I would probably rate it at like an A above post-hardcore, or would it actually below post-hardcore? I would say I'd link it, because I do love a lot of just classic, like a classic grunge you can't really beat. So we got first and second wave black metal. So Obviously, first, we're talking bands like Hellhammer, Bathory, Venom, and then second wave, we're talking about bands like Darkthrone, Burzum, Mayhem. I think both are probably like just a solid S for me, because those kind of like the old school death metal scene, that's some of the best time period for black metal, like more than like anything else. You really can't knock just old school black metal. It's just fantastic, and the history is just amazing to behold to as well. Industrial metal, I unfortunately just don't think has a lot of creative ideas nowadays, especially with bands like Rammstein or Rammstein making some of their worst material, and just a lot of the classic bands not doing what they used to do in the same way. I'd rank it at like a C. Progressive death metal, I think, is fine. I would literally rank it right beside tech death, because I think they're very similar. Progressive black metal, I would literally rank about similar. I think it just depends, and a lot of bands get caught up in making things that are just exactly what they think they need to make and not enough creativity. New metal, it's such a mixed bag, dude. Like, you got bands like Linkin Park and Korn and some of Limp Bizkit, but then you have so many crappy bands. Like, you had like so many bands I can think of that just are so lackluster and cringy to look back on. I think for the good bands, you have to rank it at like a low A, because it's borderline B because of the cringy ones, but some new, like early new metal is fantastic. Modern deathcore, I'm gonna be completely honest with you guys, not that big of a fan of it. I love bands like Lorna Shore and Worm Shepherd and Slaughter to Prevail, but the loudness war of breakdowns and the shock factor of like the review content of like reacting to things and reacting to the amazing breakdown and compilations, it's just not really, I don't know, it's not my thing. I think it'd be like high B, because I would say above speed metal, because here's the thing, I appreciate what these bands do. You have to respect what they're doing, but I don't like the way that there's this push to just make the heaviest breakdown possible and nothing else. Stoner metal, I am going to put right beside sludge metal, because I feel the exact same way. Everything that I said for sludge metal applies. Funk metal, I think, is honestly kind of like a C tier, below brutal death metal. I think brutal death metal has to lead C tier. Funk metal is just so pretentious, and there are so few bands that I feel like justify some of the acclaim they get. Death thrash, I'm gonna be real with y'all, I can't think of many bands that fall under that category that I have a lot of experience with. I'm just gonna put it at D, but not because I dislike it necessarily, but because I just do not know that much about it. I'm assuming they mean things like Legion of the Damned, but I don't know enough about it to really say. Old school deathcore. So is this like as blood runs black, like all shall perish era? Because that stuff's good. Like early Suicide Silence, early Job for a Cowboy, that's some good deathcore. I have to say, like mid A, below grindcore, thrash, below thrash metal, I think is where I would put it if I can move it. I think that's where I put it. Symphonic black metal, not a fan of it. I'm just not. There are very few symphonic black metal bands I actually enjoy, and it's like I said in my like what your favorite genre says about you. I think it's the equivalent of people who need sprinkles on their ice cream for it to be digestible. Symphonic death metal, I feel pretty much the same way about. I think it's perfectly fine on its own, but I just would rank it right beside symphonic black metal, because I think there can be good ideas, but I think more often than not it undermines it. Pagan/Viking metal, I'm just not big on it. I think like mid D, I would say, above DSBM and Gothic metal, because it's actually, I think it's right beside power metal, because I love like Amon Amarth and stuff, but when you get these very niche genres that are so insulated, it's kind of hard to have like a tangible reason to just make that your whole life and listen to it. New wave of Swedish death metal. Now this has some good soup. That has to be like a high A. Black thrash, it's just more of this like, you mix these genres, and sure, there can be like outliers that are awesome. And in fact, you know what I'm gonna do real quick is I'm just gonna go through there's actually, yeah, okay, so I'm gonna just go through real quick. Black thrash goes in D. I'm gonna say industrial death metal goes in D. Industrial black metal goes in D. Progressive thrash goes in D. Avant-garde death metal goes in D. Let's see. Progressive power metal goes in D. Black and doom metal goes in D. Technical thrash metal goes in D. And I think that's the rest are like progressive doom goes in D. And then epic metal goes in D. Like, it's, for me, it's like all of these genres are absolutely, they can have amazing records with it. They can have fantastic records I've loved or enjoyed. But when you spread it so thin, I think that's when we kind of get into an issue. Because notice how, like, a vast majority of those artists, or those genres, excuse me, I did not include in my describing all genres, explaining all genres video. It was like an hour long, and none of those bands were there, because I just think it gets to the point to where you're spreading yourself too thin. Moving on, though. Gothic Doom. Never fucking mind. Let me put that there, too. I forgot about that. Avant-garde black metal, I think is fine. It's just, I don't like the term avant-garde. I think I'm going to put both of those in D, because it's like, it's fine. Bands that are avant-garde, they're fine. It's just, I don't get why we have to put those labels on everything. Avant-garde metal, for me, I'm going to put this at like a just flat B right at the top of B, because you can't really define what avant-garde really means. It's just people saying whatever the fuck they want to say at this point, and I truly don't believe most people know how to define it. Epic Doom, I think, is fine. I think Candlemass falls under that category, and it's fine, but I think it'd be like a C. Drone Doom, where is drone metal? You literally have dark metal and drone doom, but you don't have the initial genre. For that, literally, I'm putting them both in D. Like, I'm sorry. It's just, you can't define something that is so niche like that. Slam death metal. Okay, so slam metal. I like slam music. I like slam death metal. It's fine. I think it kind of is one of those genres that has this habit of being very overly cumbersome and blending in with each other, similar to like a lot of grindcore releases. I think I'd rate it like a mid B, like right below hardcore and melodic death metal, I think is where I would put it. Post metal is fucking beautiful. I love post metal. I think it would go in S tier, actually. I think I'd put it like right at the bottom of S tier over the others, but post metal's fantastic. I love ambiance. I love just so much atmosphere and texture and depth and dimension in music. It's fantastic. Melodic metalcore. I love melody in metalcore music. I think it made some of the best metalcore music of the 2010s and 2000s. I'm going to put it below thrash metal, though. This is, I've never known how to pronounce this, but it's like the German scene of heavy metal and industrial music, like Rammstein. I don't know enough about it to really comment much, but I will put it at a C just for the sake of Rammstein. I don't want to say this genre name because it gets me demonetized every time I say it, so, but it's just, it's funny, it's good for a laugh, that's literally it. For that, it gets a C tier just because it's fucking hilarious to talk about, to joke about. Black and folk metal is going, I know how I talk about like subgenres and stuff, but this is one that actually makes sense because it's two cohesive things meeting each other in a way that's tangible, and a lot of bands do it. This for me is over post metal. It's an S tier. Black and folk metal is some of the best black metal in my opinion. It is beautiful. I love the atmosphere to it. It's fantastic. Black and death metal, there are so many great black and death metal bands. I think you have to rank it at like a low, I think it's the lowest A based on this, but I would still say that it's definitely up there. Glam metal, no. The riffs alone and the iconicness rates it at like a C, pretty high, like right below brutal death metal, but no higher. I could not justify that. Experimental metal's kind of like avant-garde, where it goes right beside it. You can't really, how do you really say what that means? it's right in the middle because it can literally be anything. I love funeral doom metal, but I can acknowledge the fact that it treads water a lot. For that, I will put it at like a high B above speed metal, because there are fantastic bands. Bellwitch is phenomenal. Drown is phenomenal. Their Mournful Congregation are phenomenal. But there are so many funeral doom metal bands that sound the same. Progressive metalcore, don't get mad at me. It's going above metalcore as my S tier. I can't put it above heavy metal. I won't do that to you. But progressive metalcore is my favorite genre. Hands down. Invent Animate, Era, Born of Osiris, Veil of Maya, Periphery. There are so many amazing progressive metalcore bands. I love them so much. Cybergrind, underrated. It's very niche, but I think it's underrated. Some of my favorite albums come from the cybergrind genre, but I think it is like rightfully underrated at times because it is a lot, and I think a lot of people just take the piss out of it for the fun of it. Death grind, it's a lovely genre. I don't know why I phrased it that way, but like Benighted, Cattle to Cap. But like I said in my What Your Favorite Genre Says About You, you'll have too much death metal, not enough grindcore, or too much grindcore, not enough death metal. That's kind of how it always goes. And for that, I'll put it at like a low B, but it's still a really good genre. Post-black metal, black gaze, I think is a very solid atmospheric genre. And honestly, Alcest and Death Heaven, I didn't mind them as much as a lot of people did. I think they're like the highest B. I think it's a really good genre. It's very conditional. Gore grind, I love the brutality, and you can't get what you get from gore grind from many other genres, especially like classic gore grind material. I think you have to put it like a C though, right below brutal death metal. I think those can kind of be the gatekeepers of C tier. Black gaze is, it's its own thing. I'd put it right beside post-black metal because I think they pretty much are the same thing. Neoclassical metal, I'm just not really that big of a fan of it, and the same for war metal / raw black metal, but I can say that war metal is good because you have a band like Revenge and Blasphemy, so it has to be right beside gore grind and brutal death metal. I think that those are the gatekeepers now. The new wave of American heavy metal, so we're talking like the Lamb of God, Unearth era. I think it spawned a lot of fantastic music, and it spawned a lot of very awesome subgenres. I think you kind of have to rate it as like an S because, like right beside the new wave of British heavy metal, because it brought about so much freshness into the genre with all the groove metal bands, thrash metal bands, death metal bands, black metal bands, so many different bands experimenting. You had the entire nu metal and rap metal sphere coming around, and funk metal was getting bigger. Grindcore was experimenting. Napalm Death were doing so many cool things. And Extremity also became amazing. So it has to be there. And then proto metal, you have to rate it above heavy metal and S. Nothing would exist without these bands. Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, these bands that literally set the groundwork and foundation. So for that, you have to put it there. But there's my list. There we go. There's my list of my favorite metal genres. There's the metal genre tier list. And if you disagree, let me know down in the comment section below. I would love to hear what you guys think, and if you disagree with stuff, just let me know down in the comment section below. It's fine if you disagree with me. Let's have some fun with it. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed it. It helps out the channel a lot, and I'd really appreciate it. This took a while to make. Subscribe to join the review family today, and smash that notification bell to be notified of my future uploads. You know who it is. My name is Jay Morris, and I'm signing off saying, farewell.